Hey, it's Dylan Smith here, actor from I Am the Night, and I'm with Chris Gordon on Hellblazer Biz.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Listeners, wherever you are in the world right now, you are tuned into Hellblazer Biz with your one and only host, me, Chris Gordon. Thank you all for tuning in. Appreciate it as always. Please go out there and subscribe, follow, share, and tweet Hellblazer Biz on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. You'll find me on iTunes, YouTube, if you're in the UK, Amazon Prime UK, and also on Roku and Vimeo worldwide. So please go out there and share the love. This week I've got a fantastic guest for you, veteran Canadian film, TV and stage actor, who's been in Maze Runner: The Death Cure. He's currently starring opposite Chris Pine of Star Trek, and India Eisley, who's seen in The Secret Life of the American Teenager, in the popular limited series suspense drama I Am the Night. Directed by Patty Jenkins, director of Wonder Woman, etc. He's a true chameleon because he transforms himself into a crazed serial murderer Sepp, who sadistically cuts people up and sells them as his latest works of art. It's actually inspired by true events. I Am the Night tells the gripping story of Fauna Hodel, a teenage girl who's given away at birth and grows up outside of Reno. Fauna lives more or less comfortably with the mysteries of her origin until one day she makes a discovery leading her to question everything. Intriguing. So without further ado, I introduce to you my fantastic guest this week, the amazing Canadian actor, Dylan Smith. Well, I have the honour and the privilege this week of the company of Dylan Smith, who is currently being seen in I Am the Night, where he plays Sepp. So hi Dylan, thank you for joining me and thank you for talking to me.
Thanks, Chris, for having me. Yeah, it's very cool show to be speaking about. It's I have to say it's one of the ones I'm proud of.
Yeah, it's a very good topic. Definitely. When I've not seen it myself, but when I was researching it and the period and the whole story of where it's sort of what's behind it has been one that has intrigued me quite a lot as well. Since obviously it's the Black Dahlia. I'll just jump straight in. Obviously, that whole era is still an unsolved crime. So it's the shocking nature of it as well. So, and plus, obviously, it's been set right in the 50s LA when things were starting to thrive. I mean, you've got lots of things going on in the US. It's just it's post-war, so you've still got that sort of feeling going on where things are starting to rebuild again. Well, in Hollywood, you've got, segregation, I guess, still, within society of colours and things. I'm trying to say this, but, that black and white, that was still going on back very strong in the 50s as well. So I guess it's a real interesting era to be involved in when you're making something.
Yeah, no, and actually we creep right up into the 60s because one of the elements of the show is the Watts riots that took place in LA, and actually Fauna Hodel. I mean, that's what's so extraordinary is that, even though the story fictionalizes lots of aspects of Fauna's story and other aspects of the truth, the truth of the matter is that Fauna Hodel did cover some amazing territory, so to speak. And amazing is a very trite word. She covered some pretty horrific territory, to be honest. She was witness and found herself in Watts during the Watts riots. She found herself in the home and discovering that she was related to a man that was at the center of the LAPD corruption, the infamy of the LAPD corruption of the Hollywood set at its highest level, because back in the 40s and 50s, he'd been a gynecologist to the studios when abortions were illegal. So he kind of, he held secrets on them and received all the benefits of their power, including the LAPD's corruption. And as well, he was the linchpin of the surrealist art movement coming to America. He was very much an ambassador for the surrealists in in high circles. He was best friend. He was very close friends with Man Ray. I think he'd been a letter correspondent with who wrote the Surrealist Manifesto. I've forgotten his name now. Just a brain fart. I think he was acquaintances with Salvador Dali, and he was having the quintessential sort of art soiree / sex parties / sort of underworld happenings that we sort of mythologize in LA noir.
Yeah.
And he was kind of the guy having it all. And so this woman, Fauna, was sort of, all roads lead to her in a way, or from her, she was able to sort of touch on all these things. So I understand why Patty Jenkins and her husband, Sam Sheridan, were so riveted by the story, because if you tried to write a story that covered all of that in one story, somebody would say, come on, like pick one or the other, but that's too far-fetched. So to have the woman alive for most of the time that they were researching and developing the story, and unfortunately, Fauna only died 3 months before, or I think 3 to 6 months before we started shooting, was it was an extraordinary thing that they had. They didn't have to hypothesize. They had the horse's mouth right there, and then furthermore, we had her daughters on set the entire time we were shooting, which just kind of grounded the whole thing for us, and kind of blew your mind, really. You'd finish, especially my character. I mean, I was a fictionalized character, and he's pretty sensational. Yeah. But even then, to step off of that unbelievable dark world, and then to see these bright, shining faces and think, wow, you're 1 degree away from horrors that I represent, my character represent. That's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I was going to ask, actually, if Fauna had been a part of any of the pre-production and obviously the writing of it. So you have kind of confirmed that her she was there and discussing this, because it must, like you said, it must be very surreal knowing that you are on set with her daughters, for example, and it was their great grandfather, I think it was. And like you say, they're just one step away from all of that. And all of that life and darkness, So it must be very surreal when it's such a when you do actually have people there who are from the same family, and it's just to make sure it gets done right. And
and I think what was so amazing is, by all accounts, from Patty, from Sam, from her daughters, who were of themselves just the brightest shining lights. But, he's been very outspoken about talking about how positive and filled with love and optimism and front foot and self-belief Fauna was, despite, coming from a very, very, very bleak, dark background, and discovering that the background behind her background was even bleaker and darker, So her father is her grandfather, and that's the whole crux of it. It's a child of incest. So her daughter's grandfather is also their great grandfather. But I think that was refreshing in a way. I think that was necessary for the story to be told, because I think if you've been dealt with people who very understandably could have been, victims of inherited trauma and casualties of inherited trauma, like Fauna's mother, Tamar Hodel, was. I think you would either, you might try to distance yourself from them in the making of the TV show because it could get very complicated with people like that.
Mm-hmm.
But because there were these bright lights, I think they were able to stay very close to the source, because the source wasn't dark, the source was light, and the source was fluid. They were all fluid in there. They'd worked through it, so they were capable of speaking about it rather than being traumatized by it. And so they were able to stay very close to the heart of the thing, which I think, even though it's heavily fictionalized and it's very stylized in a film noir genre aesthetic, I think it was written with the value on the truth.
Yeah.
Within it. So yeah.
Excellent, excellent. It's one I really want to see, to be fair, because it's right up my my sort of avenue. It's some, and like I say, it's just a mind blowing story, and how does your character then? Because obviously you mentioned you played Sepp. I hope I pronounced that right. So and it's a fictionalized character in the story. So what can you tell me a bit about his character? What are his drivers? Where does he fit into it?
Well, he fits into the art scene. Mm-hmm. First and foremost. The way I figured it is, if you've got George Hodel, who has the confidence, or has this dirt on Hollywood, having mm-hmm. given abortions to starlets. Consequently, he has sort of inherited protection from the LAPD. But even the LAPD will have their limits. Mm-hmm. They will, their limits may involve turning a blind eye to stuff. But just because you turn a blind eye to stuff doesn't mean that stuff isn't happening that needs to be taken care of. And I think that's where maybe Sam Sheridan sort of took some departure in some imagined aspects of the story based on a possible truth. I.e., my character is first and foremost an aspiring artist, but he's also a very lost soul, possibly somebody desperate for a father figure. Yeah. George Hodel was, in fact, in real life, a rare specimen, especially in LA. He was much more of a European elite. Mm-hmm. He came from this European family. He was a virtuosic pianist as a young boy, so much so that when Rachmaninoff came to LA to give a public lesson in a very dashing sort of showman way, instead of getting somebody from the Philharmonic, they actually brought in a young 5-year-old George Hodel.
Oh wow!
So he was that sort of that talented.
Yeah.
He then emerged from the cultural elite of his family initially and became things like a crime scene reporter, mm-hmm. sort of following the late night 24-hour murder sort of beat of the LAPD. He had a real appetite for the salacious.
Yeah.
And then he trained as a doctor, and then he sort of, came back into the elite fold with his associations in the art world. So for somebody like my character, Sepp, who I sort of imagined a backstory of him coming from a very blue-collar background, and really beginning as sort of a hired driver. That was my backstory, as a hired driver for Sepp, for George Hodel. And then George Hodel sort of inspiring me that everybody has an artist in him. Mm-hmm. And that I started to discover that it's the surrealist art movement was very much about your working within your unconscious and getting out of your sort of moral way and getting out of your conscious way, mm-hmm. and living in a kind of amoral, unconscious, spontaneous, kinesthetically live place. And in a way, anybody could do that. So I think my character finally felt a sense of expression and release and a potential validation in maybe creating work that was able to fuel, I don't know, senses of inadequacy, broken homes, maybe an abusive or neglected childhood. And he suddenly was being, beside George Hodel, he was, maybe he was always on the fringes. George probably kept him constantly on the outskirts because he wasn't very sophisticated. But he was hobnobbing to a certain level with these very sophisticated, very middle upper class, cultured, educated people, which is very attractive. And I think very attractive to a blue collar person who aspires to be, to be something other than who he is, to literally check out from his being. And so I think over time, George, had to, they had these happenings and there was some very dodgy behavior going on. And I think, people might be losing their minds on narcotics. People might have gone too far in their unconscious, in these artistic soirees and where women were constantly objectified. And if you've ever read the Surrealist Manifesto, you will see a level of objectification of women that is quite daunting. And if you want at the Surrealist art, which is the link to the Black Dahlia murderer, i.e. that the form that Elizabeth Short was laid out in after she murdered and decapitated, all the images of that body can be found in Surrealist art that predates her murder. So that is part of the justification for a lot of people's supposition that the murderer of the Black Dahlia had an affiliation or was a Surrealist artist in LA at the time. I think my character eventually had to take care of some unsavory business for George. And he was constantly seeking to impress George and to impress him on artistic terms, which were the terms that George was most impressible by. And so the ultimate goal to achieve as a Surrealist artist, to a kind of naive, fragile mind, at least, was to be fully inhibited and to fully objectify the female corpse, which was to murder which was to murder a woman and turn her into an art piece, as one might suggest Elizabeth Short, the Black Dahlia, was. So in my instance, in our story, where it sort of segues with Fauna Hodel is that she appears in George's life and seems to become a preoccupation for him. And I think it pushes my buttons of feeling neglected and overlooked. And it dawns on me that I might commit the perfect both sort of revenge and attention attraction by turning his own daughter into this work of murderous art. In a way, it's like saying to George, put your money where your mouth is. Do you care more about family member, or do you care more about the fact that I have just pushed the art form to the next level? So that's sort of what I was focusing on, was very much how did it, there's a lot to describe about sort of how do I get into the emotional backstory, but also how do I get into the logic and how do I relate to this guy? How can I connect with this pretty serial? It's not even a serial murderer. There's a delusion with a purpose. And as an artist, to imagine an artist taking it to that level was a very kind of attractive journey, actually, as an actor.
That's fantastic. That's actually very, very interesting to listen to as well, Dylan. Because I talk to a lot of people about that, to actually to get that, the depth that you've gone into, and how you've developed the character, and how he thinks and how he interacts. It is very, very fascinating, and I can see why that would make it obviously such a hit. Because if you put in that much in, it's your job, I guess, as an actor, is to put that much effort into the role itself, and that's what makes something so much more believable when it's on screen. And definitely about the abstract art. I mean, I've actually just drew up a picture of Elizabeth here, the pictures that were taken, and as gruesome as they really are, which I have seen them before, it's there is, I guess you can see where abstract sort of art has been utilised in the display of her body and her parts, and yeah, exactly how you've put it. I can't put it in any better words, to be honest, because you are right. That's very, you can see how that expressionism has come through.
Yeah, there's some books out there by art, I think they're art critics or art historians, where they've, I have one of them, I don't know where it is right now, but they've literally gone through the surrealist art that relates to the crime scene photos of Elizabeth Short, and described the surrealist art movement in LA at the time, what the significance, the repetition of certain images. So, for example, her arms, as they were severed, but they were laid out in almost the shape of horns.
Yeah.
And the bull, and the horns of a bull, was a repeated image throughout surrealist art. And even I think there was performance art of people using their arms in that very position to replicate the bull's horns as a kind of, and I think the bull was part of the male sexual masculine mystique.
Yeah.
And a lot of other aspects. I can't recall the details of it now. But yeah, no, that's really, it's a fascinating journey to go down. And I was grateful that Sam Sheridan tipped me off to some of it. Everything from the Marquis de Sade to the Surrealist Manifesto to a couple of other books that make those associations. And then I kind of did my own work in terms of trying to find the mask of a character who didn't just, for me, completely nonviolent person. So my fear is that my eyes give that away. So my big concern was how do you create the mask of somebody? So I mentioned it before in a couple of interviews, but a key thing for me was the eyes, because cameras, feature film, of which this felt, Patty Jenkins shot on film. Yeah. It's only parts. It might as well be considered a feature film. And my character was very underdeveloped when I was even cast, and it was very much a creature. It was almost like a silent movie role. It was further developed because both the network and Sam sort of bit by bit, they cumulatively decided, now we want to know more about why this guy's doing what he's doing, rather than being kind of archetypal film noir baddie wearing a fedora in the shadows of doorways watching predatorily the young girl. Now we actually want to get into the psychology. But one of the things I did was study Mike Tyson's eyes during the heyday of his fight. Yeah. Because something came up, and I can't remember when it happened. I think I was thinking about eyes. I think I might have Googled something like evil eyes or something. And, and certain serial killers came up. But then there was Mike Tyson, and what it was, not that Mike Tyson was, in any way a serial killer. I actually think he's a very complex and fascinating, interesting, intelligent human being. But what I found fascinating was that, especially during his fighting years, what you would see in his interviews with, what you would see in his interviews in the matches, in the fights, as they were standing squaring off, is you would look at somebody who was literally welcoming and salivating at the potential joy and delight of getting into violence. There was nothing about, I'm working up the courage to be steely, or I'm going to outstare you, or I'm harder than you. None of that was there. It was just a man looking at somebody going, I am starting to salivate. This is starting to taste good. This is starting to smell good. I'm starting to feel who I am. This is, it was really profound to see. And I found his eyes the most terrifying things I'd ever seen. And so I really concentrated a lot on trying to find that mask. Yeah. Because my character has some pretty unsavory lines where he actually captures Fauna Hodel, and he tells her what he's going to do to her. Right. And it's very cannibalistic. And so I had to kind of, how do I come to believe that I could say these lines? Mm-hmm. And part was like, okay, I have to imagine the violence on a human body to be something that is delicious, that is tantalizingly just stimulating and exciting and full of creativity and potential. And actually, it was a blessing in a way that Sam made it a kind of culinary thing. That made it a kind of feast, because then you could turn it into, what's a gourmet meal taste like? What do you look forward to in a gourmet meal? Yeah. What are the flavors? What are the smells? And then make those substitutions.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay, that's a great take on it. Yeah, you're right. Mike Tyson's got some scary eyes, especially back in his heyday. He really could. Yeah, definitely. So, what was it like? I mean, obviously you mentioned Patty a few times as well. So, how was it working with someone like Patty Jenkins? I mean, it's a stellar cast all through with yourself. You've got Jefferson Mays, Chris Pine, India obviously playing Fauna. How was that working? How did you have that? Did you have a good bond? And how, with the other cast members?
Well, I think Patty was, I think it was a couple of things. I think Patty and Chris covered all the A-list that the network, so that was, everything was checked off. So then it allowed Patty, and I think Patty probably would have had, had final casting anyways. Yeah. But Patty was then able to go around and really make strong choices. And, you don't always get to go in the room for something like this. And I actually auditioned 3 times for Patty, 3 different roles. Mm-hmm. Each role more and more disturbed. So I think it wasn't until I auditioned for Sepp that Patty kind of went, yes, I knew this guy was lurking. Yeah. That's who he is. He is, which I genuinely found a bit confronting. I was like, what the fuck is it about me that makes her think, yeah,
you'd be perfect for this serial killer.
That's what his face looks like. But because it was Patty, and because Patty is at heart and in her history an independent auteur filmmaker. Yeah. And previous to that, to me, I found out once I got to know her, she also studied fine arts, as did Sam Sheridan. Okay. So you're dealing with somebody who came from the camera department, so she's got an incredible eye.
Mm-hmm.
She has an uncanny gift for storytelling. It's an added bonus. I think it's why her big feature films are so successful, because she invests a lot in story. She's as passionate about that as the camera.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I found so extraordinary is that Patty, you feel like Patty's watching you all the time.
Okay.
If she's got the time, even if you're sitting in your cast chair or you're just walking around in the, where the craft service is, and she happens to be, you feel like when she's looking at you, she's trying to see you, trying to see something about you that will make her go, that's how we capture him. There, that little moment, I just saw him express as he was talking to that crew guy. That is the aspect of character. And I think when you feel you have somebody who you've already decided you trust, watching you so closely with that set of gaze. I've had that a lot in theater. A lot of theater directors have had that. And the wonderful thing about that is if you have that kind of a trust, if you feel you have those eyes looking at you, if you have that much trust in the director, then you really can get out of your own way. You're constantly, as an actor, trying to let go of knowing what it is you're doing. Every take, you begin as if you had no idea what you were about to do.
Right.
It's the thing you have to achieve on stage all the time. Doing a play over and over and over. How do you begin a play every night as if you've never done it before?
Yeah.
Because when you're live and you're having real responses, that's what holds an audience's attention, not
definitely.
the verse of, oh my God, did you just say that? You're trying to get out of your way so you can have real reactions.
Yeah.
So when you have that much confidence from a director, or in a director, and she has that much confidence in you, and really Patty gives you 100% confidence, you feel like she cast you, and now she's saying, and now it's over to you. My job was casting you, and now you're pro, and now I want you to do what you do. I think my kid is about to wake up. Yeah, he's just waking up.
No problem.
I might be okay for 2 seconds. So, just very quickly, the thing was having. I'm going to have to go. But
no problem.
It was very easy working with Patty because she was a god. And then you looked at all the actors.
Yeah.
And I had nothing but respect, and my respect just grew and grew and grew for all the actors. I thought Chris was I've worked with a lot of big A-list stars, and Chris was the purest and truest A-list movie star I've ever been with. Jefferson Hodel has worked for some of my inspiration avant-garde New York theater company, so I consider him a legend. India was one of the most salt-to-earth actresses I've ever worked with. Yeah. So the whole thing was just a dream.
Fantastic. It's just sound. It really does sound it. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic, and to hear about this production, you've definitely sold it to me, Dylan, because I really want to watch this now, which is great. And obviously the character, I want to, because I love hearing about obviously the characterizations and in depth, and I mean, I've got a love of film and TV as well, so being able to look into this. Now, I'm going to let you go because I know you've got to go off. You've got to go off to there now. So I would just like to wrap it. I'll wrap this up just by saying it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, Dylan. I really appreciate that you have taken the time out to talk to me.
Thanks for the good questions. Thank you very much.
Oh no, you're welcome. And I hope I get to talk to you again on my show sometime soon.
Yeah, I would love that. Anytime.
Thanks again, Dylan. Absolutely fantastic. And thank you once again to the guys at the Anderson Group Public Relations for getting me in touch with Dylan. Thank you. Appreciate your support as always. Everyone who's listened, I hope you all enjoyed listening to it. Anyone who sent questions in, thank you so much. I really appreciated it. Go out there and see I Am the Night, basically, because it sounds like a fantastic show. And yeah, based on a true story. It must be interesting to see, because it's always one of those enigmas and stories that has gripped people for quite a while. So please go out and view that and support Dylan. And yeah, this has been Chris Gordon chatting with the amazing Dylan Smith on Hellblazer Biz. Till next time.